Would everybody please sit down? And I think it's time for us to get started. And so since we have Chinese-speaking group here in this lecture hall, and we still have English-speaking group, so we're going to be talking both in Chinese and English simultaneously. All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is Ziwei Li, and I would like to say thank you for coming. And I'm glad we have a rather large audience today. So I'm a second-year graduate student here at MIT, and this is Jintao Chen. He's undergraduate student in EECS. So we both members of the MIT Chinese Students and Scholars Association, also known as CSSA. And I would like to welcome you to join one of our lecture series called MIT Talk. And in this talk series, we invite distinguished speakers from all over the world, different fields, to share their ideas and wisdoms to young talents here at MIT and around Boston, with the intention to inspire intellectual thinking. Today, we take the honor to receive our very special guest, Master Khenpo Jigme. Khenpo Jigme is one of the most prominent Buddhist masters of modern Tibet. Tonight, he will give a talk, perhaps the most exciting and mysterious characteristic of Tibetan Buddhism, the reincarnation system. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Master Khenpo Jigme.
I'm very happy. Today I'm meeting with some professors and students from MIT. We have the distinct opportunity to thoroughly discuss the profound topic of the reincarnation system as it is understood and practiced within Tibetan Buddhism. In other words, I will be providing a clear and simple explanation of this fundamental concept. I'm truly very glad and deeply appreciative to have been given this wonderful opportunity. I became a monk at the relatively young age of 23, and from that significant moment onwards, I have continuously and faithfully been wearing these sacred robes ever since. These distinctive red robes, except when I am sleeping soundly at night, I consistently wear them. With this sacred identity, I diligently study, conduct research, and actively practice the profound teachings of Tibetan Buddhism. This significant location is also situated at a challenging altitude of 4,000 meters. I spend most of my time there. In recent years, I may have traveled to some other interesting places and explored different environments, but in the future, I genuinely think I would still prefer to return to that cherished spot, to live in seclusion in a place around 4,000 meters above sea level. That's truly my dream. My dream isn't to travel extensively all over the place, not at all. You, however, are from a reputable institute of technology. I've also had the opportunity to visit some technical schools in the past. However, technical schools are generally characterized by a more pragmatic and practical approach. This contrasts significantly when considering subjects like Buddhist studies or other forms of knowledge that inherently carry a profound sense of mystery and spiritual depth. It seems like there's not that much interest, but just now in a small, intimate group, it was quite a different experience. I met some students from your Institute of Technology. And it turns out that your genuine dedication to diligently studying certain religions has truly surprised me. It seems that here you're also remarkably open-minded, and some of you even possess a special and insightful mindset when it comes to the profound study of religion. Tonight, our important topic is about the fascinating concept of reincarnation in Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism itself isn't actually all that mysterious or enigmatic at all. But nowadays, many people around the world still regard it as a particularly mysterious and esoteric kind of ancient knowledge system. Practitioners of Tibetan Buddhism themselves aren't actually all that mysterious either. But many people often see those who practice Tibetan Buddhism as especially mysterious and enigmatic figures. Because of this, no matter where I go, I always think to myself, others must see me as some kind of oddity. So I truly have this profound sense of urgency deep inside of me, But in reality, whether I'm talking to other people, eating a meal, or diligently studying in many significant ways, I should genuinely say we're actually very much the same. Today, we're going to be talking about the concept of reincarnation. Reincarnation. Nowadays, most people tend to think, for example, in Han regions, people often talk about reincarnated lamas or living Buddhas. Actually, the term living Buddha was added by some people later on. Its true, more accurate and authentic meaning is simply an incarnation, a manifested identity or reborn consciousness. For example, in Taiwan and among some Western practitioners and scholars, they often call it Tulku. This term, Tulku, is also a direct transliteration from the Tibetan language. The authentic Tibetan pronunciation of this word is Tulku. This Tibetan term is directly translated, whether in English or in many Chinese texts. It is often replaced with the two characters Zugu, Tulku. In other words, a reincarnated person is called a Tulku or a living Buddha. Today we are going to thoroughly discuss the significant term living Buddha. Tulku, as for the word Tulku, in fact it means an emanated or manifested body form. In Tibet, regarding living Buddhas and their recognition process, last year there was a specific period when people said, there is a particular place in Beijing, and some people quite exaggeratedly claimed there were 300,000 living Buddhas. But this is definitely an exaggeration. However, some media also reported it this way, saying the same thing. There are many such reincarnated tulkus in Tibetan Buddhism. In many Han regions, there are quite a lot of examples and instances as well. Perhaps many of you students gathered here today are also quite curious and intrigued. You might genuinely be wondering and eagerly anticipating what I will share and discuss in my upcoming talk. What exactly is a tulku among you Tibetans? What is a living Buddha? I'm curious, what do you want to know about reincarnation system? Just now I asked the president of the student union. They said it's just some rather mysterious aspects of Tibetan Buddhism, but the entire system of reincarnation might very well be like this. Because nowadays in the modern world, in the West, yesterday at Harvard, there was also a very prominent and distinguished professor. He said this, he said that in the very West, indeed, very truly disciplined practitioners who are not necessarily especially popular with absolutely everyone, but if there is really good publicity and effective promotion in various different ways, then it will be very beneficial. Consequently, everyone becomes especially and profoundly curious about them. Actually, the intricate and deeply rooted reincarnation system in Tibetan Buddhism does indeed possess a very long and venerable history. The profound phenomenon of reincarnation that arises under such a complex system can be said to have a very positive and beneficial side. This particular aspect is undeniably true. It is certainly not as some people currently imagine or perceive it to be, that all reincarnation systems should just be abolished, that it's merely a political tool designed to deceive the general public and so on. I think this particular kind of statement is also overly critical. However, some people genuinely believe that as long as someone receives a legitimate Tulku certificate or is officially recognized by a monastery, then they are valid. Once he has already been officially enthroned and the enthronement ceremony has been successfully and formally held, or what people often refer to as a living Buddha or a Tulku, a reincarnated Lama, a spiritual leader, perhaps he is not actually the incarnation of that person, the true incarnation. And among ordinary people, we may not be able to tell. This is a very peculiar and unusual phenomenon. Therefore, whether through academic study and research or through religious principles and spiritual beliefs, it is sometimes very necessary to conduct research on this. In fact, the meaning of Tulku or living Buddha in a broad sense can be divided into 4 types. The supreme incarnation, like Shakyamuni Buddha himself, then the skillful incarnation. The skillful incarnation refers to Buddha statues, stupas, as well as all kinds of sacred and revered Buddha images and intricately detailed thankas that we meticulously create and sculpt with great devotion, and also various divine and spiritual incarnations and diverse and profound manifestations. He can transform into all kinds of people, all kinds of animals. and even possibly into bridges, any phenomenon or manifestation that genuinely benefits sentient beings can be accurately called a tulku. Additionally, there is also a distinct fourth type, specifically called the incarnation, that effectively tames various beings. This is like, if there are people among humans who need to be benefited, then it takes on a human form. If among animals it appears in the form of an animal, a living creature, it can also become an animal. It can become a hungry ghost, and in the hell realms it can be a hell being to benefit sentient beings. Among celestial beings, it also appears in the form of a celestial being to benefit sentient beings. Including among humans, it can benefit others as a king, or as a minister, or as a soldier. There are all kinds of forms. So, in a broad sense, what we call a living Buddha, or Tulku, actually many people could be called by the name living Buddha. Each of us could even get a living Buddha certificate. As for this kind of Tulku, many people now think that it is a unique specialty that is truly exclusive to Tibet, that it is a distinctive method that is actually unique to Tibetan Buddhism. But in fact, according to its doctrine, it is not something exclusive to Tibetan Buddhism. Even during the time when Shakyamuni Buddha was alive, there was a young attendant by his side. The Buddha personally prophesied that 400 years in the future, in the southern part of India, he would become a bhikshu named Nagarjuna Bodhisattva. In the southern kingdom of Vidarbha, there will be an auspicious bhikshu named Dragon. He'll transcend dualities, spread my teachings worldwide, teach the supreme path, reach the joy stage, and enter Pure Land. In the Lankavatara Sutra, it states, as well as in the drum of the Dharma Sutra and the Manjushri Root Tantra, several scriptures mention that in the future, 400 years after my parinirvana, in the prosperous region of the southern kingdom of Vidarbha, you will become a revered bhikshu named Nagarjuna. When various debates about views arise within my teachings, I find it important to address them. You will rely on your wisdom to dispel wrong views. In the end, you yourself will be reborn in the land of ultimate bliss. So at that time, some people would prophesy to reincarnate as certain figures 400 years later. This is not only the case for Bodhisattva Nagarjuna alone. There are also many such recognitions and prophecies of reincarnations. Such reasoning can also be readily accepted by Theravada Buddhism. This is because when the Buddha was nearing his parinirvana at that particular time, Venerable Ananda had not yet attained arhatship. He was in great pain at that moment. He said, if you are leaving, what will we do? What will we do in the future? What will become of us later on? At that time, the Buddha spoke to the assembly, Ananda, do not grieve. Ananda, do not weep. In the future, I will manifest as a spiritual friend to benefit all of you. He said, do not be sad, please do not cry, my dear Venerable Ananda. In the future, I will become a spiritual friend. I will often manifest various forms among people and appear in many different guises to teach you the Dharma and guide you, so you should not be sad. This can be clearly found in the Buddhist scriptures even today. So there are explicit records of this. When it comes to Tibetan Buddhism, at that time, I remember it should have been during the era of the revered guru Padmasambhava. There are also many such accounts of reincarnation, including the daughter of King Trisong Detsen at that time, who tragically died in her early teens, but later miraculously came back to life and was then taught the profound Dharma. He then clearly prophesied that she would indeed become the revered Longchenpa in the future. But generally, the so-called reincarnation in Tibetan Buddhism is not necessarily a Buddha, nor necessarily a very high state. It should be said that through long-term meditation practice, at a certain point, one eventually attains one's own absolute highest state of being. If many of his endeavors in this life are not completed, then in the next life, he relies on his meditative abilities to continue fulfilling them. This spiritual lineage holder can also be precisely called a Tulku, which is a recognized reincarnation of a Buddhist master or deity. Roughly 700 years later, starting from the third Karmapa, a relatively new and significant system for recognizing living Buddhas was formally established in Tibet. This method was different from previous recognition methods, especially for high-ranking lamas. There are some rather particularly special and unique systems specifically designed for recognition purposes. Actually, to speak quite impartially and honestly about this sensitive matter, are all these reincarnations in Tibet absolutely genuine and authentic? I wouldn't dare say so definitively, especially nowadays, perhaps behind the so-called reincarnations. There are various transactions involving various statuses, and these are important, and possibly some dealings involving money and wealth. As everyone knows, when people acquire significant status and accumulate substantial money, many established systems can unfortunately become rather complicated. This situation is just like the so-called democratic system, which at a certain critical point can also regrettably become quite complex. End up with someone eventually coming to power whom people originally didn't want to. So all kinds of situations can truly happen. However, this particular kind of system, with its inherent structure, can also undergo many significant and transformative changes. Nevertheless, when we meticulously and very impartially evaluate these matters, it is truly evident that the reincarnated lamas within the rich traditions of Tibetan Buddhism are a central and unique aspect. Whether generation after generation or certain individuals, many of their previous lives accumulated wisdom, their deep compassion, including their fundamental character traits, and some of the significant things they accomplished in their past life, can naturally be recalled and accessed in this current life through meditation and spiritual practice. This particular phenomenon does indeed truly exist. Including ourselves, we have personally witnessed it with our very own eyes. My teacher, Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok, truly had many profoundly extraordinary qualities. I would absolutely never use any lies to praise my own revered teacher. In Buddhism, we always say that if you use lies to praise your teacher, it is actually a form of slander against them. So I would never do that. But what I saw with my own eyes, including when we went to Nepal in 1990, in a cave in Nepal at that time, his terma from a previous life, some profound wisdom teachings and sacred writings were naturally revealed. We, who were beside him, were frantically and diligently writing everything down, capturing every single word. He was speaking it all out with great effort. That's why in his collected works now, there are many truly remarkable things which people without faith or those who didn't witness the scene at the time might not be able to see or understand. When we went to Mount Wutai, he meticulously wrote down the empowerment ritual and the sadhana of Manjushri Bodhisattva right then and there. He completed writing them on the spot. After he finished, he could recite them from memory for the rest of his life. Some of these things are perhaps beyond what ordinary people can imagine. Some are related to his writings from previous lives. Some are indeed from his current lifetime, or they are manifestations of other enlightened Buddhas and compassionate bodhisattvas. Some people without any particular faith might genuinely think this is lying, so it's quite hard for me to adequately explain this as well. I once had the opportunity to read Mathieu Ricard's The Monk and the Philosopher. He wrote a remarkable book. You might have already seen it. I actually had the opportunity to meet Mathieu last year in France. He used to be a very accomplished and respected biologist. Both he and his father were scientists. In his book, he wrote about the extraordinary reincarnation of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, specifically detailing the events from the tender age of 3. During the profound process of recognition at a certain place, he was truly amazed to discover that he genuinely was the reincarnation from his previous life. This included the specific names of some of his devoted disciples, particularly those loyal disciples from Bhutan. All these people, when he was distributing blessed objects, he could name each one of them one by one. I don't know what this reincarnated Lama will become in the future. I am not responsible for this, and I am certainly not praising him either. But that is precisely how it is written in his book. He is, after all, a renowned scientist. Sometimes when I endeavor to make a truly fair and impartial judgment, I find that there are some very unique and extremely rare things to be found within the profound traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. There is this so-called reincarnated Lama, whether it's recognizing a reincarnated child or not. The entire process is truly, truly amazing and quite remarkable. I think this kind of phenomenon simply cannot be denied. I'm not trying to establish that, but rather to acknowledge its profound existence. The entire reincarnation system is reasonable. Nor am I saying, nor do I truly want to deny absolutely everything. But we should stand from a fair and factual standpoint and then make our careful judgment. I know that many young people in the West, especially online, are so-called critics and skeptics. I've also learned about this so-called a truly critical mindset. Sometimes I even feel a bit averse to it because they criticize absolutely everything, whether it's reasonable or not, they still continue to criticize. If the criticism is indeed truly reasonable, I genuinely admire that spirit. Because criticism requires a certain creativity. It requires opening up one's profound wisdom and having a truly rich and expansive imagination. If education is closed off and merely observational, then it definitely won't work. However, criticizing others without any valid reason is indeed a significant mistake. Unreasonable criticism is a grave error. Nowadays, many young people, I know that in many educational institutions and schools across the United States, probably starting from the 1970s and the 1980s, various schools began to introduce critical thinking courses. So many Chinese students, as well as students from other places, after studying here for 2 or 3 years and then returning home, they become critical of all traditional culture, including many of their parents' behaviors, which they can't stand and constantly criticize. But in this particular case, it's also very important to carefully observe whether such criticism is reasonable or not. In fact, I've seen some Western scholars whose main principle for criticism is that their wisdom must be mature. But when criticizing, it should be done in a reasonable and logical way, and only criticism that is persuasive is acceptable. If there's no justification at all, and as long as you can denounce. In this case, although some school teachers keep encouraging it, as long as you can speak up, things will gradually get better. And this is somewhat similar to certain Eastern ideas about debate, including those found in Buddhism, where there are daily and readily available debate platforms for such important exchanges. But in many significant ways, these are quite different and distinct. For example, when we engage in a debate with each other within the monastery, you can speak for as long as you are truly persuasive. But if you lack persuasiveness and just talk to others, then you will definitely be significantly penalized in the debate. What I am saying here might sound a little bit critical. If my statements need to be thoroughly criticized, just wait for a moment. And during the interactive session, please feel free to criticize and challenge me as much as you genuinely like, okay? Actually, the reincarnation system in Tibetan Buddhism, back in the 17th or 18th century, around that specific historical time period, some of Hegel's philosophical writings also mentioned that the reincarnation system is unreasonable. Because if a certain person, a certain lama is reincarnated, he is considered a god, and gods and humans cannot be one and the same. The two are contradictory. So the reincarnation system is unreasonable. It is a means of deception. I've also thoroughly analyzed this aspect, actually at that specific time. Hegel's philosophical ideas included some understanding of Buddhism, and there was both praise and a certain amount of unreasonable criticism. But in fact, as I just mentioned, the so-called reincarnation in Buddhism is not truly the same as what Christianity refers to as a god being a human being. It's not like that. So although these philosophers are truly remarkable and have made tremendous contributions to human society, but sometimes when they might not have fully understood the historical and religious context of the time, some of the profound things they said may indeed require us, the later generations, to further meticulously examine and thoroughly verify. This includes the influential philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche as well. For a significant period of time, both Nietzsche and Hegel, later in some of his books, he also specifically mentioned Christianity and also Buddhism in various contexts. But comparatively speaking, he placed Buddhism a bit higher in his philosophical hierarchy. But sometimes he didn't really understand Buddhism either. He often regarded it as a doctrine that was extremely world-weary, an escapist, purely nihilistic philosophy. However, if you truly take the time to deeply understand some of the profound teachings of Buddhism, you'll quickly come to see that it's actually not at all as he described it to be. Of course, I also firmly believe that back then, it wasn't quite like it is now in the present day, where if you want to translate something, you can just use your phone and get a translation instantly. That kind of convenience simply didn't exist. Plus, at that time, some aspects of European culture, most of them, when they received their education, I've read their biographies, much of the education they received came from Hindu teachers. Although Hinduism and Buddhism originated in the same region, in reality, these two religions are completely different. And people who practice Hinduism also don't really understand Buddhism very well. So, influenced by their own respective teachers and philosophical backgrounds, some of the books they later wrote, when compared to the perspective of those of us who are more specialized in Buddhism today, the reasoning is actually very, very simplistic indeed. Perhaps they didn't really understand it themselves. I don't know if there are any specific religious studies programs offered here, but if there are indeed religious studies available, for example, if you want to understand Hinduism, you must know the background of Hinduism, its methods of practice, its entire way of life, its whole way of living. And it's the same if you're studying Buddhism. You must understand its background and its content. Nowadays, in many academic circles, people just pick up a few books and start working on the text itself. Sometimes the written words themselves are not enough to make things clear. But whether it's Buddhist doctrine or religious doctrine in general, there are much deeper layers of meaning behind the text. If someone truly doesn't have direct guidance from a dedicated teacher, even if they diligently read a lot of books, the ultimate results of their independent research may not be very satisfactory. If the research results are not entirely ideal and their critical assessment is somewhat off the mark, if their overall perspective truly lacks professional depth and comprehensive understanding, then perhaps this particular work, despite its efforts, may not fully achieve its intended objectives, may not necessarily make a very great contribution to human society. Just now, I noticed that your school's emblem mainly features science and art. Actually, I remember Einstein wrote a book called The Decay of Morality. In this important philosophical book, what does he specifically talk about? He says that all forms of religion, art, and science throughout human history are actually these three disciplines, which are like the three main fundamental branches that extend from a single unified tree. Therefore, as human beings, we should actively and consciously pursue these three essential things. In fact, it's all for the sake of making the material world around us more profoundly meaningful and significant. That is, for the ultimate goal of achieving true freedom. His original words go something like this. He said that the truly most important things indeed in all of human society are like three branches on a single tree. Which three branches? One is science, one is art, and the other is religion. Although these three distinct disciplines share the same fundamental root, but their branches and leaves are different. So I often think that some of us might be diligently studying science, standing firmly on the branch of science, and are very proficient and highly skilled in it, but may not be as well versed or knowledgeable in the branches of religion and art. If someone stands on the branch of religion, then they might not necessarily understand art and science. If someone stands on the branch of art, then they might not necessarily understand religion and science. So sometimes, perhaps because of our own field of expertise, the education we've received in our own department, these factors are closely related. As for knowledge outside of our own field, we need to actively seek it out and diligently pursue it. At such times, what kind of mindset do we need? I truly think that this is something many young people should seriously consider. Of course, in today's highly pragmatic and often challenging society, many individuals may find it quite difficult to dedicate themselves to studying religion or art and pursuing such fields. And there are certain challenges involved. At such times, perhaps the most crucial thing for us, indeed truly, is to rely on adjusting our mindset. Because in our lives, we often face all kinds of uncertain pressures and challenges, all kinds of truly unimaginable and utterly unpredictable things. What might potentially happen in the very next second or even the next hour are indeed things that are quite hard for us to fully know ourselves. Many such significant things are happening right now or will certainly happen in the future. At times like this, perhaps what matters even more for us is just like what your school often talks about, unity of knowledge and action. Applying what we've learned to our daily lives is also crucial. So if we need to use this in our lives, I'd like to offer a few concluding suggestions in closing, if I may. My first suggestion is that in our daily lives, we should always maintain a very strong, resilient, and positive mindset, no matter the challenges we face. We need to have the spirit of diligent study. Let me just tell you a quick story. In Tibet, there is a person named Pingchuo Wangjie. He used to serve as a translator for central government leaders and many eminent monks and masters. But later, he was imprisoned for 18 years. In the book he wrote, he mentioned himself. He said that during those 18 years, every day he saw only a gray wall in front of him. He couldn't witness the changes of the seasons outside, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Throughout those 18 years, he never saw any of it. So he had absolutely no idea when the seasons changed or how much time had truly passed. But even in such a challenging environment, he never gave up hope. He remained incredibly steadfast and diligently kept studying. During his intense studies, he had neither ink nor pen to record his thoughts. At that specific time, he wore a blue prison uniform every single day. And this blue uniform, sometimes he would carefully use saliva to squeeze out the dye from it, then use the sharp tips of grass to keep writing continuously on thick toilet paper, constantly jotting down the inspirations he had during his research. And sometimes, when he had a particularly good idea, he would get so excited by his writing that he would jump up, at which point the prison guards would inevitably come down and start brutally beating him, thinking that he had significant mental problems. Later, during those long 9 years, I truly believe it was indeed 9 years, I read this book many years ago. During those 9 years, he pretended not to speak and just remained silent the whole time. After he was finally released, he couldn't speak for a long time. Strong-willed people, even in such environments, won't give up on learning. But nowadays, many young people, even though they have all kinds of resources. Today I went to a library at Harvard. There was said to be an incredible number of books there. A lot of people were reading as well. But nowadays, when we read, it's really convenient because all the necessary conditions are in place for us. We really need to make a special effort to read these kinds of books. When it comes to related knowledge, we must be especially diligent. We need to approach learning with a kind of ascetic dedication. This is very important. That's the first point I wanted to make. As for my second suggestion, since today's primary topic is indeed very truly reincarnation, whether the reincarnation system in Tibetan Buddhism is good or not, it is a complex system that has existed for many hundreds of years. Perhaps it brings significant benefits, or perhaps it brings considerable harm. In any case, it may continue to exist for a very long time to come. It's not necessarily as we might imagine, just like with the concept of democracy. But for us as individuals, there is the concept of reincarnation. So for each of you, do you actually have a reincarnation? Do you have a past life? If we, the human beings sitting here right now, in this very moment, why haven't we become animals? There are so many animals in the ocean. Why haven't we become like them? Among us humans, some are wealthy, while some are very poor. Some people are truly wise and some are not. Why is that exactly? Is it really just as the so-called theory of evolution says? Is it just a matter of genes or a random coincidence? I think whether you have faith or not, everyone should pay attention to this question. If when a person truly dies, it's really just like a lamp going out, then it wouldn't really just matter. But if people truly have past and future lives, what should we do? This question is very important. Actually, this is very fortunate because it means we have a continuing existence. If we didn't have a continuing existence, it would be very tragic for us. We would only have a few precious decades of life. And even those fleeting decades might not be truly fulfilling. Humans are inherently different from other beings. We should therefore possess a particularly profound and insightful wisdom. This kind of wisdom should be applied to our inner selves. We know that technology is so advanced nowadays. Artificial intelligence right now is present all over the world, especially in the United States, where AI research has been ongoing for more than 30 years. Now, it's causing a sensation worldwide. Scientific research focused on external material things could be said to have reached its peak, but are our hearts truly and deeply happy? It seems that inner problems are only increasing more and more. Why is that exactly? I think nowadays, everywhere you look around, artificial intelligence, in its rapid advancement, has unfortunately taken away many of our traditional jobs. It should be said that during the Industrial Revolution, many blue-collar jobs were replaced by machines. Now, it's many white-collar jobs as well, including many of you who are currently studying architecture. I've seen some short videos recently, though I genuinely don't know if they're entirely real or merely fabricated for entertainment purposes that depict various scenarios. Let's say in the future, much of architecture and design will also inevitably be replaced by advanced machines, including doctors, lawyers, police officers, and many others. If this scenario really happens in the future, there will be many people in this world who will be very, very idle. At that crucial point, perhaps in our hearts, we must have a very firm and unwavering conviction. And this kind of deep conviction can't be easily faked or manufactured. It should genuinely come from truly understanding your own mind. However, this profound point might indeed be found in some Eastern philosophies. My final suggestion is, no matter what kind of job you have, what kind of social identity, what kind of specific profession or personal hobby you have, absolutely none of that really matters in the end. People all over the world actually genuinely like happiness and universally dislike suffering. But the ways in which people pursue happiness are incredibly diverse. Sometimes we encounter truly major life events, but those who know how to adjust their mindset may still be able to stay happy. If an individual is unable to adequately adjust their personal mindset, even a very small and seemingly insignificant issue might unfortunately become something truly fatal for them. Therefore, my third and important suggestion is this. We should live a meaningful life where our minds can easily adjust and adapt and live very happy and fulfilling days consistently. I strongly believe we shouldn't live passively or aimlessly, nor should we give up easily when facing challenges. We should work very hard with dedication and purpose. But in the entire process of growth, some things just can't be accomplished. Or when we encounter some setbacks, we should still work diligently and remain determined. Perhaps these temporary setbacks, perhaps this profound pain, are actually truly representative, incredibly valuable, and immensely beneficial to your life. Because our lives can't always be smooth and peaceful. It's like a road. Sometimes it has twists and turns. When there are unexpected twists and turns in life, we also need to carefully adjust our overall mindset, no matter what your current status is. Everyone should regularly observe the state of their own mind and inner state. This is extremely important. Actually, at every stage of our lives, we are constantly learning and growing and adapting. We are often especially attached at the time. But after it's over, it all seems rather laughable. For example, when you were a young child, you were especially and deeply attached to every single toy you owned. You even cried many times over toys. Then, when you were a bit younger, maybe you were especially attached to certain relationships. You also struggled desperately for the sake of love. Then, when you reach middle age or adulthood, you might become especially attached to your wealth and your status. Perhaps you are particularly deeply and profoundly attached to them, holding them close to your heart and mind. When you reach the advanced stages of old age, you may become especially and increasingly concerned about your overall health and your later years. Actually, these are just different forms of attachments that manifest themselves at each distinct stage of life. If you can adjust yourself well when facing each attachment, this too can be a kind of enjoyment. Especially since our daily lives are often filled with many uncertainties and challenges, we may encounter some troubles along the way. When you run into trouble, you need to adjust your mindset well. Take me, for example. My health has been a bit better these past few years. A few years ago, I might have had to stay in the hospital for 2 or 3 months every year. I spent that time in the hospital, and every time I was admitted, I think, this time I might have to stay for another month or 2. Every time I would bring a Tibetan book with me. While getting IV drips and receiving treatment, I would translate at the same time. Sometimes before I was even discharged from the hospital, I had already finished translating an entire book. So, some of my Chinese students might already know that several of my previously published books were actually translated in the hospital in those previous years. For me, this was actually a rather positive and beneficial condition. In other words, enduring a significant amount of time in the hospital was also an opportunity. I see it that way myself. So, for absolutely everyone, we should truly cherish and appreciate such valuable opportunities at different and distinct stages of our lives. We often say that when good opportunities arise, we should treasure them. But actually, when unfavorable conditions, suffering, and obstacles come, they are also opportunities, and we should cherish them as well. Everyone here is a truly unique and individual life. I believe that every single life possesses its own unique and continuous journey. Within these different continuities, each individual person can truly seize the wonderful and unique opportunities that come at every significant stage of their life. In the end, you can ultimately create an especially brilliant and memorable story for yourself. Thank you all.